everybody, and welcome to week 4. I'm so excited. And, I don't like to say that we're saving the best to last, but in this case, I really feel like we are, because when it comes to getting your season started, getting your all of your ducks in a row to feel like you're really on top of your role as a dance studio owner and as a dance teacher in your studio, then making the most of your time and getting your productivity on point is absolutely the way to do it. So we are giving you lots of juicy gold today in today's session, where we're talking about time management and productivity. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for being here. The QR code is in the corner. If you would like to download the workbook for today's session, go ahead. You don't need to. If you've got a blank notebook in front of you, that's totally fine. But if you would like something special to print off and to work through yourself at your own pace, then feel free to go and download it there. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I am recording today's session here on Biripi land, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Thank you again to MDM for having me over the last 4 weeks. It's been super fun, and I hope if you're watching the recording at home or if you're watching live today, that you've been able to take lots of notes and that you are tweaking little things in your studio to help you feel like you're on top of everything as we head into 2023. So if you have not been here the last couple of weeks, a little bit about me. My name's Stacey Morgan. I'm the principal of Port Macquarie Performing Arts and Danae Cantwell School of Dance here in Port Macquarie and in Kempsey. I'm also the director of Morgan Media, a podcast production and content company that produces content for businesses that are focused on education and women and education and all things business. I'm the president of the Mid-North Coast Dance Association, which provides opportunities for people in my regional area or kids in my regional area to have performance opportunities or workshop opportunities, masterclass opportunities that would normally be reserved for kids in the city. Dance Mid-North Coast is a great way to be able to really give back to the community that gave so much to me when I was growing up. And I'm also the mum to Lucinda, Patrick, and Henry. I'm a studio owner. I am a business coach. I work very hard to be able to empower the people around me in order to be able to run their dance studios and run their businesses in a way that really suits them and their lifestyle. So I'm so grateful that you're here, because obviously if you're investing in your time here to make sure that you are getting your season started in the right way, then you are keen to make your studio the very best it can be. And that's what we're going to be talking about in today's session. So your download is there if you want to use the QR code to scan your workbook. If you don't, as I said, it's totally fine. You can draw some pretty pictures on your blank notebook instead, but it's there if you would like it. And that will also take you to my newsletter so that you can stay in touch with me after today's session. So let's get you organized, hey? Today we're going to talk about the wheel of life. We're going to do the wheel of studio life. We're going to have a look, have some reflection time on your studio, how it stands, where it stands right now, what it looks like. And don't be scared. Don't think, oh gosh, really? Sometimes that moment of reflection is really valuable in figuring out where you want to go in the future. So we're going to do a little bit of reflecting before we get stuck into, planning out for this year and making sure that you've got everything sorted for this year. We're going to create an ideal week. I'm hoping by now you have yourself a schedule sorted. You have, things in place for how your days are going to look, what your Monday is going to look like compared to your Friday, when you're going to have time off, when the concert's planned, you've booked the venue and all those things. We're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about using our time really wisely and being as productive as possible. All right. Start by making some notes. We're just going to do a bit of a brain dump, and I will keep talking and keep challenging you with some questions, and you can just make notes as we go through. I want you to think about what you need to do to make sure that you're on top of things going into this season. So perhaps there's things that you need to make sure that you're on top of. Perhaps you need to make sure you've got calendar reminders set in your phone. Perhaps you need to make sure that the meetings that you're having with parents are scheduled in a time where you're not supposed to be teaching. Perhaps you are making sure that your year is planned out. Perhaps you need a yearly planner with all of the dates, the rehearsal dates, the competition dates, the recital dates, the concert dates, all of those things are in your yearly planner. Or perhaps you just need to make sure that you have a motivating space to work in. Perhaps it's your office at the studio, perhaps it's your home office, perhaps it's your dining table, wherever your place of work is when it comes to all of the organization that needs to happen in order to run a successful dance studio. Maybe it's all about making sure that that space is a space that you feel really great in, you feel energized in, that you can make sure that that's going to be a place where you're going to get lots done, because that stuff does matter. I want you to think about what lessons and challenges that you learned from last year that you don't want to repeat this year when it comes to organization. So perhaps you put one rehearsal date in the newsletter, but then a different rehearsal date went to the venue, and then you had a bit of a mix up between the two. Perhaps the exam dates came back and they were different to what you'd published to your parents, and you got that cranky email from Mrs. Jones who wasn't happy about it because she'd booked a holiday. What are the challenges that you can remember from last year that have come up? And we all have them. We absolutely all have those moments. But what are those things you really want to make sure that you don't repeat next year? We had our concert date published. We do our yearly planner at the beginning of the year, and we had our concert date published for the 3rd of December for last year. And it wasn't until our local theatre put a big sign up for a Michael Bublé tribute show with the date, the 3rd of December on it, that I went, I thought that was our date. And when I went back and checked the email, we were booked for the 10th of December, yet we'd been telling everybody the 3rd of December. Like, rookie error, even though I have no excuse. I've been doing this for long enough. And, thank goodness for the Michael Bublé tribute show. Otherwise, we would have turned up at the theatre on the day with 300 kids and just, it would have been a nightmare. So I've got those challenges. I've got those lessons that I'm learning from this year. I'm going to double check those emails and double check that yearly planner. What are the things that you don't want to repeat? What are those little things that happen to you that you want to make sure you're on top of for next year? What would you like to be better at when it comes to your productivity? Is it that you love, a good procrastination? Is it that you like to just sit back and wait for things to happen? Is it that you're a super planner, but it means that sometimes you overplan things and you spend too much time getting things organized when, doing half the amount of work would have got you to the same result? And finally, how can you help your teachers be more organized when it comes to their classrooms? For a long time, I spent oodles of time doing professional development on my own organization skills, on my own productivity, making sure that I was had all of the skills and was using all of the systems to help me be productive. And I just assumed that through osmosis or mind reading or something, some voodoo, that my teachers would take on that PD that I'd done, read my mind, and also be as organized. And of course, that's crazy. So it is important that whilst you're attending today's session or watching today's recording and learning all of this stuff for yourself, it is really important as well, if you want to see a difference over your organization, if you want to see a difference in your studio, that you take the time, you put some time aside, and you make sure that you're giving this information to your teachers as well, so they can be just as productive, so they can use these tools in their classrooms, so they can get organized with their curriculum and their lesson planning, and they can come in and show up as their best selves when it comes to the work that they do in the studio for you, because that's so incredibly important. All right, with all of those questions asked, I hope that you've taken some notes. I hope you've written some things down. If there's anything that's really stirring on you, that really speaks to you, that you think, yes, I absolutely want to make sure I do that, then put a big circle around it. And I encourage you not just to leave it in your workbook or your notebook, but make sure you put it somewhere really important so that you can see it often and do something about it rather than just thinking about it. When you get organized as part of the studio, you're going to be able to serve your team and your dancers and your community better. And isn't that what we're all about? Being able to serve, being able to give back, and being able to create impact for our dancers, for the people that we lead, and also for our community. So when you think, do I really need to think about, how unproductive I'm being or how disorganized I'm being? Yes, because the impact can be so large. The impact and the possibility of impact that we have as studio owners is so incredibly important. All right, so we're going to start off today with the Wheel of Studio Life. So draw yourself a circle in the middle of your workbook or the middle of your blank piece of paper. Perhaps you've got your favorite notebook in front of you. And I want you to divide it up into lots of different categories. And the way that the Wheel of Life works is that the center of the circle is 0 and the outside of the circle is 10. And for each of these categories, I'd like you to give yourself a score between 0 and 10 of how you think things are going in your studio. Now, this is not an aspirational exercise. This is not, where do I want to be in terms of my retention? Well, I want it to be a 10. No, it's about what's happening right now, how you feel about things right now. And this is a great exercise to revisit at the end of every term, at the end of every year. Perhaps it's a great exercise to do with your team. I always find it interesting to do this exercise with my team, because some areas that I feel like, yeah, we're doing great, things are good, my team will come back with very different answers, and I'll be like, oh, what did I miss? And so it's a really, important opportunity for feedback. So at the moment, it's just you. So I'd like you to sit down and think about this and really make sure that you are thinking about the reasons, not just kind of just grabbing a number out of the air and hoping for the best, but think about the reasons you're giving yourself that score in each of the different categories. And so we'll work our way around the circle in terms of, let's start with productivity, because that's what we're talking about today. So in terms of your productivity and the studio productivity, are we making the most out of our time? Are we getting the most out of our team for their time? Because of course we pay our team very well. We should be paying ourselves as well, but human resources cost money. And are we getting the most out of that time and the most out of the people that we have? And what can we do in order to make sure that our systems and our policies and procedures are really up to scratch, so that the people that are working for us feel like they're being very productive in their role? They're getting the most out of each day that they come to work. When it comes to your finances, what do your finances look like in the studio at the moment? Are your numbers up? Are your numbers down? What's your revenue look like? What was your profit like last year? How are you going in terms of taxes and loans that you have to pay back? Perhaps you've just done a big fit out of the studio and you're paying back construction loans and things like that. And how many arrears do you have currently in your studio? How many families do you have that just aren't paying their bills on time or aren't fixing up their accounts when they should be? Give yourself a score for finances out of 10. When it comes to performances and opportunities, are you giving your studio the amount of performance opportunities that feels good to you? And that's different for everybody. So I'm not saying that you need to give 10 performance opportunities to your kids in order to give yourself a 10. If you do one stellar, awesome concert at the end of the year and you feel great about that, then that can be a 10 out of 10. It's up to you to figure out what your expectation is, what your aim is, what your goal is in terms of opportunities that you're giving your students, and then give yourself an appropriate score out of 10 for that. When it comes to your classroom, what's happening in your classroom? And is that a 10 out of 10? Is that a 5 out of 10? Is that currently sitting at a 2 out of 10? And that means, do you have a proper curriculum in place? Are your teachers following through with that curriculum? Are you seeing improvement with your students? Are you seeing them, move from one milestone to the next milestone? Are they feeling good about their own progression in terms of the style that they're doing? So what's happening in your classroom, and what score can you give that out of 10 today as it stands? Not how you'd like it to be, but how it is today. How about your team? How are they doing? Is there good team morale? Is everybody feeling good? The start of the year is always, a really good time to gauge how everybody's going. If everyone's energetic and enthusiastic to get back to work, then, you should be feeling good about that. Are you creating a space that people want to come to work to? Are you giving them, opportunities for their own personal development and their own growth? And how does that factor into the score that you're giving your faculty and team out of 10? When it comes to mission and culture, we talked about this in week 1. What do you have in place? What is it? Do you have values that everybody in your studio knows about? Do you have your mission? Is your mission and vision really clear for the customers that are coming to you? Not just the customers that are returning for the new year, but brand new customers that are coming to you for the first time. Do they know what your studio is about? Do they understand why they're choosing you? And are there ways in which you could make that a little bit clearer heading into the new year? Marketing and communication. Have you had a really strong marketing campaign over the Christmas holidays so that people know that you're there and know that you exist, and they want to book their child in to come and try class at the start of this term? Do you have a marketing strategy that is going to be consistent throughout the year? Because of course, if you're doing a rollover enrollment, so you can't just enroll at the beginning of the year. If you're continually taking enrollment throughout the season, then that's important. It's important that you stay top of mind in your community for people throughout the year, not just at the beginning of the year. And in terms of your retention, what's your retention like? Do you keep track of your retention? Do you understand which of your teachers are your, A game players when it comes to retention? Who are the teachers that you have on your team that have kids that stay and stay and stay? And who are the teachers that you have on your team where kids will come and try things for 5 weeks and then perhaps move to different classes or move to netball or to soccer or to something like that? It's important as a studio owner that you understand each of the strengths and weaknesses of your team members and where that retention sits. The industry average is 80% in terms of your class turnover. It's interesting to sit back and have a look at the numbers that you had at the end of last year and the numbers that you've had re-enroll for this year, and have a look at where that sits, and does it come close to the 80% mark, or do you have to wait another week or two? I know that we're sitting in that situation right now, in that we've got a good return of kids coming back from last year, but we know that, once we get back into classes in those first 2 weeks, people are just going to turn up. People are just going to come and say, oh, we're back for dance. Even though they've had all the opportunity to enroll for the last 3 months, of course, they're going to turn up on day 1 and say, hi, we're back. and hope for the best. So really understand those retention figures. And if you're not quite sure where to start, then please reach out to me, because I'm more than happy to walk you through the way that we do it at our studio. But perhaps you want to give yourself a score from 0 to 10 for retention right now. And what you do is, once you've figured out your score, you count that many towards the outside of the circle and draw a line, and then you color in with your favorite color from the line that you've drawn all the way back to the center. And just like a wheel on a car needs to be quite, circular and needs to be nice and smooth, so that when you're rolling your car down the hill, it's not going clunkety clunk, 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 and is really difficult and uncomfortable. You want your wheel of life for your studio to be really smooth as well. And it won't be. And that's okay, because that's how we learn where we need to, that's how we reflect, and that's how we learn where we need to, fix them things up. Because when everything is running smoothly, when that wheel is smooth for you in your studio, you will find that going to work is a whole lot smoother, that getting, to the next competition or the next performance opportunity is smoother. You'll find that the communication and relationship building with your parents is a lot smoother. So you really want to think about ways in which those areas of the wheel of life that you've scored a bit lower, how you can build those up. And so once you've done that, moving on to the next part of this reflection process is write down what the top 3 areas were. Perhaps you scored really high on classroom and marketing and finances. Write down those 3 areas, and then give us a reason why. Why is it that those areas are really strong for you? Perhaps in the classroom, you've got a great group of teachers. You've done some great professional development over the holidays in terms of improving on that curriculum and building on that curriculum. And so you feel like they're in a really good place. Perhaps your finances are good because your profit is up on the last couple of years of COVID nightmare, and your numbers are looking good, and you're moving towards it. And perhaps you've got a really strong marketing campaign out there in the market at the moment that's bringing in brand new students, that's attracting new students, new families to your studio. Put that reason down too. And then I'd like you to reflect on the hard part. This is why people go, oh, I don't really feel like reflecting on things. No, this is good for you. What are the 3 lowest areas for your wheel of life? Where did you score the lowest? And I'm not going to get you to write down the answer why, because you probably already know the answer why. It's probably like sitting on your shoulder, yapping at you right now. What I want you to do instead is to think about, what is one thing I can do to step myself closer to the outside of the circle this year? And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to change the world. I'm not saying you have to get yourself from a score of 3 to a score of 9 in 12 months. I just want to know one thing that you can do to get yourself from a 3 to a 4, or from a 5 to a 5.2, just to take yourself a little step further. So perhaps one of the lowest scores that you had was retention. And perhaps that's because you don't understand or know what your current retention rates are. So one thing that could get you closer to 10 would be to start to analyze that. So to print off your class numbers from last year, print off your class numbers from this year, and then just look at them and see where you can find patterns, see where you can find differences. That would be one thing that you can do to step yourself closer. Perhaps one of the lowest areas for you was finance. Perhaps you're like I was in the very early days of my business, where I just had a look at the bank account. If there was money in it, I was like, okay, good, I'll buy the new tutus. And I just really didn't know anything else that was going on in the business. And I didn't want to, because I had labeled myself as not a numbers person. And I thought, as long as I have an accountant who I pay well, then they can tell me whether things are good or bad. And I'll just stick my head in the sand over here and just hope for the best. That's not me now as a studio owner, but that was me in the early days. And perhaps you resonate with that because you've labeled yourself also as not a numbers person, and you are just checking the bank account and hoping for the best. So one thing you could do in order to improve your finances is just put time aside once a week just to print off your profit and loss, or to figure out how to print off your profit and loss. That would be a good start too. And have a look at the numbers. Have a look at the numbers compared to last year. Have a look at the numbers compared to the last 3 years. Are they up? Are they down? That education, that step in the right direction in order to really understand your finances and what's going on in your studio would be a really positive step for you if finances is one of the 3 lowest areas in your studio. Let me also say, some of you might have finances as one of your lowest areas because you are currently not paying yourself. I hear this all the time from my studio owner clients who come to me for coaching. when it comes to asking them about, whether or not they are making enough money for their family, whether they're making enough money to keep them fueled and keep them motivated, a lot of them, like to change the subject. A lot of them like to avert their eyes and talk to me about the weather or something completely different. So if that's you, you're not alone. There's lots of people that are feeling exactly the same way, and that's okay. And it doesn't need to be like that forever. But one thing you could do to get yourself closer to the outside would be to have a discussion with your accountant as to how you make a regular wage for yourself, for all the hard work that you're doing and all the time you're spending, something that is regular and something that's happening throughout 2023. I hope that makes sense. I hope all of that together makes sense. And I hope it's a good opportunity for you to reflect on where your studio currently is, and also to set yourself some little goals as to where you would like it to be in the next 12 months. And as I said, I revisit the Wheel of Life, both the personal Wheel of Life and my studio Wheel of Life, every term. It's good just to reflect on where we're at and to see where the gaps are and to be able to make plans to be able to move forward. I find that really reassuring. I didn't used to. I used to find it terrifying, but now that I do it on a regular basis, it's a lot smoother, and it's something I actually enjoy and look forward to. So I encourage you to do the same. And if you download the workbook, then you can take it and print it off as many times as you like. Print one for every term this year. All right. Number 2, we're going to create your ideal week, because if you don't create your own ideal week, nobody is going to do it for you. Nobody's going to walk in and say, it's Wednesday, you need to go walk the dogs, or you should take some time to yourself, or I've booked you a massage. That's not going to happen. We need to create our own ideal week to make sure that we can turn up at our studio as our very best self, so that we can turn up for our family as our very best self, so that we can step into the world and be able to use the platform that we have to make the impact that we want in our community and in our dancers' lives. So I encourage you to start with a blank worksheet, and there's one of these in your workbook. But if you don't want to, if you haven't downloaded your workbook, that's fine. You can easily draw this up on your blank piece of paper. And I want you to think about how you're going to spend your time this year, what your weeks are going to look like this year. Perhaps you already know, I'm teaching Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I start at 3:00. Start with those things. Start with the big things. Put them in, because they are the non-negotiables. If you don't turn up to teach at 3:00, like somebody else is not going to miraculously appear, you need to be there. So put those in. Put the other things that are non-negotiable in. If you know you have to drop your kids to school every morning at 8:30, then put that in your ideal week. If you know that every second Thursday you have dinner with your mother-in-law, then put that in as well. Go through and put all of those things in that you know are non-negotiable in your life. And then I want you to take a step back and have a look. I want you to think about what you need to also include that can also be non-negotiable things that are going to help you turn up as your best self. Now, one of the things that I need, and I've learnt that I need because I didn't have a lot of this back in the early days, is white space. And that is areas of this spreadsheet where there's actually not anything scheduled in. Time to be able to travel from one place to the next, time to be able to sit with my thoughts, time to be able to plan, time to be able to, watch the next episode of White Lotus on binge if I need to. Just time to just be. And when you don't have those times, when you're going from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and then you fall asleep, fall in a heap at the end of the day, and you get up and you do it again, dum, 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 dum. That's the first sign of burnout. That's when we start to get into that pattern where we just, things are outside of our control. So one of the strongest and most accessible tools I have to avoiding burnout is creating white space. So if you want to blank out time, now that you've put all your non-negotiables in for your ideal week, if you want to blank out time where you're just going to be able to stop and breathe and be, I think that's going to be really valuable for you. Perhaps it's going to be first thing in the morning. Perhaps you get up before the kids, you have your cup of tea, you do it in peace, you make the lunches. Perhaps that's your white space time. Perhaps there's time for you just before you teach. I know I like to work a lot in the morning, like really get stuck into things in the office, and then I'll make myself lunch. And then before I go to the studio, I have some white space time, because then I either have time to catch up on things that need doing, or I just have time to chill. And if I've had that time just to breathe and be, then I turn up at the studio in a really good mood, really energized and really ready to go. How many times do we like race to the studio and pull into the car park and run into the studio and go straight into our first class? And then, before we know it, it's 9 o'clock. I'm encouraging you as this new year starts to block out time that will help energize you, that will help fill you up. And perhaps the idea of not doing anything or having white space time where nothing is planned gives you anxiety and makes you feel a bit, then you can give it a name. Call it something so that it sounds productive for you. Energizing time, you could call it. Recovery time, restful time. Give it a name and stick it in your diary, and you know what it is. But if you need to, put that on your to-do list so that you can cross it off once you've done it, then go for it. No judgment here. And then I encourage you, once you've got all of the non-negotiable things, including your non-negotiable white time and white space, I encourage you to think about things that can really light you up. Perhaps it's date night that happens every Friday night. Perhaps it's pizza night with the kids that you do on a Sunday. Perhaps it is that you're going to get up early and walk the dog in the morning. Perhaps it's every Wednesday at 12 o'clock, you're going to phone a friend. Have a think about your values, have a think about your goals for the new year, and think about how you're going to action those things. And they need to go in here as part of your ideal week. Then what I like to do is I like to color in. And because I'm a visual person. So I like to create my ideal week, and then I like to give it, some colors. And this is what mine looked like a couple of years ago. And it's kind of the template that I still use for everybody. Like when I do these sessions for everybody to see, just because there are lots of colors there, and I'm not necessarily doing it as well currently, but seeing the different colors gives me a good visual representation of how my week's going to go and what my week's going to look like. And just to give you an idea, in the early days when my kids were really young, I used to beat myself up a lot about not spending enough time with the kids. And when I was at the studio, I would be feeling guilty that I wasn't at home with the kids. When I was at home with the kids, I'd be trying to answer emails and trying to check my phone and update social media and thinking about Mrs. Jones and how mad she is at me and that email that she sent me that I have to reply to. And I just wasn't ever satisfied with the amount of time I was spending anywhere in my life. And so doing this exercise where I could actually see visually the time that I was spending in the different places where I was spending it, it gave me such clarity. And the example I want to give you is that I used to feel so guilty for not spending enough time with my kids. But on this chart here, pink is my children. Pink is time with my kids. So when I could see it like that, I was like, oh, I can cut myself some slack. I don't need to feel bad. Look at that. There's pink everywhere over here. And I used to think that, I didn't spend enough time working, but work on this is blue. And I'm like, oh, there's heaps of blue there. What there isn't, which is what I've learned, there's no white space there, right? There was no room for breaking and stopping and chilling. So that's what I've learned. And that's where I've made changes. And I encourage you to do the same. And once you've mapped this out for yourself, not only does it give you a good visual representation of how you're spending your time, but it gives you the ability to change. Sometimes we feel like our life is outside of our control. But really, we have control of our time and we get to choose how we're going to spend it. So take back that power. And when you get to your ideal week and you're putting in these things, it's your week. It's your ideal week. It's nobody else's. So you should use your time as you see fit. And you should use your time in a way that fills you up and makes you feel good so that when you look at it, you go, yeah, how lucky am I? We get into our own business. We get into running our own business, our own studio, because we want to have the lifestyle that we want to have for our life. We want to be able to go and pick the kids up from school, or we want to be able to go to go and help with the reading groups in class, or we want to be able to, watch another episode of The White Lotus in the middle of the day, or whatever it is that we want to do in order to live the lifestyle that fills us up. And then we find ourselves in the rat race and on the treadmill and moving a million miles an hour and wondering, where those promises went of this lifestyle that I was going to have running my own business. But you were in control of your time. And it's important that you remember that. And by mapping out your ideal week, it helps you really feel like you're in control as well as just being in control. And number 3, today we're going to talk about the productivity hacks that are going to keep you organized all year. And this is the advice that I give to anybody. Whatever you choose to do in terms of your productivity, as long as you lean into it, it'll work for you. Because lots of people get in touch with me and they say, how can I be more productive? What app should I use? What kind of diary do I need? What color pen should I be writing in order to be more productive? And you know what? There's no right answer to any of those questions. It's just whatever you choose, as long as you lean into that, then it'll work. And so with that in mind, this is what my to-do list looks like. And your to-do list might look completely different. You might use an app. You might have a yellow notepad that you carry around. You might have a special diary that you bought from Kiki K that you absolutely love and adore. Whatever it is that you have, whatever system it is that you use, as long as you're leaning into it and not using 5 different systems, then it's going to work for you. Where we get into trouble is where we have the beautiful diary from Kiki K, but then we use Post-it notes on our computer, and then we put calendar reminders in our calendar, and then we have a notepad that's on our desk that we forget to take anywhere, and then we have the notes app in our phone. And all the information about all the important things that we need to do to run the studio are all in these 5 different places, and we're overwhelmed all the time because we don't know what we're doing. So for me, this is what works for me. This is my to-do list. I carry it around everywhere with me. I have it printed out. You have a copy in your workbook if you'd like to print it for yourself. I have it printed in a notebook with a, hard piece of card on the bottom and that sticky stuff at the top, so I can just rip off a page when I'm done, and I do a new one every day. And so for me, it's got the top 4 priorities that I need to do every day. It used to be 3, but I kept adding another one to the bottom, so I've tweaked it and now there's 4. I have things that are quick tasks. I know things that are going to take less than 5 minutes. Reply to that email, buy that thing online. I put them there because that's what I start with during the day. If I sit down and I start with a few quick tasks and get a few quick wins, I get momentum, and then I can get stuck into the big 4 things that need to get done. I've got my life admin in the top corner because sometimes I forget to fill in the notes for the kids for the school excursion. Sometimes I forget to send the $2. I forget to pay the electricity bill. It's all on direct debit now, but those are the things that used to go up in my life admin section. On the other side, opposite life admin, I like to put my goals. So what goals am I working on this week? I like to include them there just so that I can make sure that the tasks that I'm doing on my to-do list are always linked to my goals, because I don't want to have these big lofty goals of how I'm going to make the business better or how I'm going to improve my relationships and then not actually do anything about it. So it's always a nice reminder to have my goals there. The B tasks and C tasks are pretty self-explanatory. I have a section for things that I need to do at home, because there's nothing more frustrating than sitting in the office at the studio and going, okay, I need to do this research. Oh, but that book's at home. And then being like, I can't cross it off my to-do list because I haven't done it. It goes on the do at home section, so that when I get home, I go, what do I need to do here while I'm at home? And I've already got a list there. I don't need to, figure out going through different lists as to what needs to happen next. I've got a section for who I need to call, because the biggest waste of time that you can spend is to sit down at your office in order to be productive and then pick up the phone or answer the phone when it rings. Mrs. Jones, who's ringing to whinge about her child having the wrong jazz shoes because you told her black instead of tan. No, that phone call can be taken when you're in the car on the way to the studio, or when you're in the car coming home from the studio, or when you're going for a walk along the beach. Don't take calls at your office desk. Make that time for being super productive. I've got a list of things that I'm buying from the shops, because otherwise I walk into the shops and wander around the aisles and run into, Susie's mum who wants to talk about Tuesday jazz. And then I go, why am I in here? I don't know. I'll just buy a chicken and some bread rolls and go home. And then I get home and realize we have no milk. So I put the things I need to buy from the shops on that list. I also put what I'm cooking for dinner, because otherwise I get home and I go, oh, that's right. And I don't know about you, but my children need to be fed every day. Every day I've got to cook dinner for them. Every single day I get home, what's for dinner? Again and again. So I have to write it down. Otherwise, it gets too overwhelming for me. I use a Trello board for all the things that don't fit on this to-do list, perhaps the things that are on my someday maybe list, the things that don't need to be touched until, the second half of the year. They all sit on my Trello board and I transfer them to my to-do list when it comes time. And I also put the important things like the appointments that I need to get to. And I like to reflect on, if I had my day again, what would I do? What do I do to it? What do I get to do that I'm going to enjoy today? And if I had my day again, what would I change? And to tell you the truth and full disclosure, because I like to be transparent with you, I don't use those all the time. I get so stuck in the to-do that's at the top, but it's a good reminder to have it there. But the moral of my story is, whatever to-do list system that you choose, as long as you lean into it, it's going to work for you. This might completely overwhelm you and you might go, she's crazy. I'm not doing any of that. And that's okay too. This is what works for me. And so get a system that works for you and lean into it and use it and let people know. Because my husband likes to leave me notes. And I'm like, that's no good to me. Where's that piece of paper? Where's that piece of paper from 4 Tuesdays ago? No, it's got to go on the master list. And he knows now if he wants something done, if we need milk, or if, he can't just yell it across the kitchen, it needs to go on the notepad, and it's normally sitting on the dining table next to my handbag. So he knows to put it down there. Get a system that works for you. Then at the end, not the end of the week, at the start of the week, I like to plan my week and think, okay, what am I going to do? What needs to get done in terms of my to-dos this week? And what are the things on my to-do list that are urgent and important? So those things need to be done first. And so I do this as part of my Sunday reset. Every Sunday, if you follow me on Instagram, I'll give you the prompt every Sunday. Some Sundays I forget, but most Sundays I'll give you a prompt for a Sunday reset. And that's just 5 minutes, 10 minutes that you take for yourself, where you sit down and go, okay, what's my week going to look like? What do I need to think about in terms of picking up and dropping off the kids? What school activities do they have on? What do I have on? When do I have meetings? What class am I teaching? Whose music haven't I edited yet for that solo that child needs for that lesson that I'm having with them on Friday? Have a think about all those things and map it out for you. There's also an opportunity. You've got a copy of this in your workbook, and you can print it out. And again, put it in a notepad form. Just take it to Officeworks or take it to your local friendly printer, family business that you've got in your town, and get them to print it out for you and to put some sticky stuff on it. And you can have it on your desk and just rip it off every week as you go. There's an opportunity to add in your goals and also the wins that you had for the week before, which is always a really good source of reflection. And then I encourage you to color code your calendar, and whether that's your paper calendar or your electronic calendar, this is the thing, this is the lifesaver. If you take nothing else away from today, it's the color coding of the calendar that's going to change your life. And I avoided this for a very long time. I was like, nope, I've got it. I'm storing everything in my brain and it's working fine. No, your brain is not a storage facility. Your brain is a superhighway. If you treat it like a storage facility, make that appointment for the dentist next Tuesday at 9 o'clock and store it in here, and just expect on Tuesday that piece of information will go, ta-da, today's Tuesday, don't forget you've got a dentist appointment. It's not going to happen. It may happen in your 20s, but it's not going to happen in terms of long-term planning. So don't use your brain as a storage facility. Please try and use it as a superhighway. Information comes in, information goes out. When you get that idea or when you make that appointment, put it somewhere where you can see it, somewhere preferably where it's going to remind you. And so what I use for that is Google Calendar. And so I make sure that all the things that I'm doing are in my Google Calendar. Even lunch sometimes goes in my Google Calendar to make sure that I remember to eat, because some of us forget that. We rush to the studio and it comes to 6 o'clock and we go, why am I starving and cranky? That's all right, I didn't have lunch today. So put it in your Google Calendar, set yourself a reminder. And for me, being able to look at my week and go, see how there's lots of bright colors? That is a really balanced week for me, because I've got lots of time to do lots of things. My white space time is actually the color flamingo on the Google Calendar. And so we call it flamingo time. So that is time that I've set aside for myself, time to do things that light me up, fill me up, energize me. And so if you want to have some flamingo time as well, then that color is available to you on Google Calendar. But choose a system that works for you and then really, really lean into it. Set those reminders. When I sit down at my desk, I talked before about sitting down at your desk and not taking calls, sitting down at your desk and being super productive with the time that you have, not procrastinating and thinking about all the, tidying that you could do rather than actually doing work. When I like to sit down for some deep work time, which is on my Thursday mornings, and in my ideal week, Thursday mornings, I have set aside 4 hours for deep work time. And I encourage you to do that as well. If you don't have deep work time set aside on your diary, even if it's just one day a week, you can do it on Thursdays with me if you want. Take a photo, stick it on your Insta story and tag me. But I like to use the Pomodoro technique, which is where you set a timer for 25 minutes and then you go and you get stuck into it for 25 minutes. And this is not like checking emails, and this is like work. So writing the handbook for the recital, it's, writing that response that needs to go to Mrs. Jones about why her child's not moving up an age group. That really stuff that takes your brain power, the stuff that you can't do while you're in transit. Get stuck into it for 25 minutes and then the timer goes off and then you have a 5-minute break. You stand up, you stretch, you go to the bathroom, you refill your water glass, you do some star jumps or some cross body movement, to get your brain working, whatever works for you. And then you set a timer and you go again. And you do that 4 times. So that takes you up to 2 hours. And once you've done it 4 times, 4 different sessions, then you can stand up and have a really good half an hour break, get something to eat, go for a walk around the block, take yourself out of your office. Then you can turn your phone back on, get on Instagram and scroll, see what you've missed during that time. But the Pomodoro technique I find really, really helpful for when I really need to get stuck into stuff. And sometimes as studio owners, we have those jobs that need to get done that are going to take a lot of brain power, that are going to really take a lot of focus and concentration. You don't want to tell one age group that they all need tan jazz shoes and the other age group they all need black jazz shoes, and then everyone turn up with different colored shoes. And you need to be focused when you're writing that note to make sure that you're telling everybody that they need tan. Or whatever it is in your studio. But it's important to have a system that you use around that. And so deep work and the Pomodoro technique is the system that I use to really get stuck in when I've got those big jobs ahead of me. All right. So thinking about your homework, what will you improve on in 2023 when it comes to your productivity? What system will you use when it comes to your to-do list, when it comes to your calendar, when it comes to your productivity, sitting down and getting stuck into work? What's the system that resonated most with you as part of this presentation? Or what system do you already have in place that's working perfectly that you just want to tweak and keep using and improve on? Who do you need to get on board as part of your productivity systems? Perhaps there are other people at the studio that need to know when you're available and when you're not available. So you need to let them know, hey, I'm going to be using this paper system with my calendar I'm going to carry around with me, or I'm going to use Google Calendar and here's the login so that you can see what I'm up to every day. Get people on board. Don't do this in a silo. Don't feel like you have to do it alone. Get people to help you out. And what have you learned today that you could pass on to your team or pass on to your students? And I do this session with my year 11 and 12 kids as they're going into those higher grades for schooling, because they feel overwhelmed with the amount of homework they have. They feel overwhelmed with the obligations they have from dance and from school and from their family and from their work. And so I do this session with them in order to give them the understanding that they are in control of their time. They can create their own ideal week that includes all the wonderful things they want to do, coming to dance, doing the performances, having their Thursday night job at the, Walkmania, and seeing their boyfriend and all the things. They can fit it all into their schedule. They just need to know how. So I love to pass this session on, and I encourage you to do the same with your students and your team as well in order to get the most out of them. Thank you so much for joining me over the last 4 weeks. It's been so wonderful to be able to share the things that work with me in my dance studio with you. Thank you, Joseph and the team at MDM, for being so supportive and so encouraging. Please follow me on Instagram. I'm at Simply Stacey Morgan, and you can find out more about my coaching and one-on-one services at simplystaceymorgan.com. You can work with me one-on-one, or my signature group coaching program is called Thrive. It's for women in business who want to get the most out of their time and get more time in life for the things that really matter. You can scan the QR code to get on my newsletter list, and you can be part of that. Our intake for Thrive starts every year in April. It's a 6-month program, and it goes through till October. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for being here.